Welcome back to the Reliest Reviews. Today's review is focused on Only Murders in the Building, Episode 6, entitled To Protect and Serve. And the official synopsis of To Protect and Serve is: Mabel brings her friends to her childhood home to meet her mother. Detective Williams starts to have her own doubts about the case as she prepares for motherhood. And before I give up my review, please like and subscribe and comment and tell me what I should review next. And when it comes with this episode, I felt like this episode was not a bad episode. It definitely does open up the doors for new suspects and also just new characters being introduced. So the episode begins with just background information about Detective Williams and her childhood, as Detective Williams explains why she does not like twins, and then she starts to bring up her own thoughts in mind about how she has different thoughts for different things, and just how sometimes the love thoughts have somewhat screwed her over in life. That is before we're introduced to Detective Williams' wife and how she is building her nursery for their son, who is either going to be named Kareem or Keith. And Detective Williams continues to bring up about why she has a hatred for true crime podcasts and just why it's nothing really special in her mind, as her wife is a huge fan of true crime podcasts and everything else. She listens to the podcast and discovers that Timecode's case was already considered closed, as it was considered a suicide in her minds. Meanwhile, we go back to the tattoo shop where Mabel reveals the jewelry that she found at Tim's place, and Gustavo reveals some surprising information, and that was Tim was supposed to meet up with a jewelry cutter by the name of Cutter, and that Tim was looking for a specific piece of jewelry that he has been looking for a very long time. And he tries to look for the photo, and just as when everyone is about to leave, we are introduced to Mabel's mother, Sylvia, who is not happy that Mabel didn't tell her that she was back in town. So then the entire gang goes to Sylvia's place to have dinner, and that is where Sylvia and Mabel have like a huge argument among different things. Sylvia says that she shouldn't have brought Mabel back to those apartments because she always felt like bad things would happen at those apartment complex. And Mabel was like, she's grown, like she could have made her own decisions and everything. So after that argument between Sylvia and Mabel, Sylvia talks to Charles and Oliver, asks them how old they are, and is like, why are they doing this podcast and everything? She wants Mabel to keep going towards the current and not go back in the past when it comes to this podcast and Timecode's case, as she herself did not like Timecode for what he did to Oscar. And after the conversation, Charles and Oliver are now starting to have serious doubts in their own mind as to whether or not they should continue with the podcast. And meanwhile, we see Detective Williams is looking back at her case with Timecode, and she discovers Tim's toxicology reports and Tim's cell phone were never given to the IT. And since the case has been already closed and considered suicide, she knows that she can't just reopen the case just like that, continuing to put doubts into her own mind about this case. So then meanwhile, Charles, Oliver, and Mabel, they talk about potentially ending the podcast altogether. Charles explains about how this podcast was something that he really enjoyed doing and how he's felt more alive within years. And the two leave, and it seems as if like Only Murders in the Building podcast is officially over with. So once they return back to Charles's place, they decide to have some gut milk, and they talk about how Mabel will feel and everything, and how Mabel is still potentially feeling hurt about this case and as well as everything else. They talk until Oliver receives a text from Teddy, the podcast sponsor, about how they need to be seen immediately. Meanwhile, Detective Williams talks to her wife about the suspicions she now has about Tim Kono in the case. Sometime later, Charles and Oliver, they meet up with Teddy, and Teddy shows them a video of Cinda Canning at Jimmy Fallon talking about their podcast, and she basically clowns the podcast altogether, jokes about it in a negative way, and this just shows me that Cinda Canning cannot be trusted. She just seems like the type of person that will sell out every single person that she could to benefit her own personal desire and gain. And because of that, Teddy is willing to offer the guys $50,000 for 3 episodes for, I would have to assume, better information, just better content all around. And just before they leave, Teddy tells Charles and Oliver a story about this coin that has been in his life and the family's life for centuries. Those two decide to leave, and meanwhile we see Oscar and Mabel talking, catching up on old times, and Mabel receives the text from Gustavo about the jewelry piece that Tim was looking for, and they find a photo where Zoe was wearing that piece the night she was killed, and Mabel is now thinking, as in, like, why was Tim looking for that piece that Zoe was wearing? And Oscar brings up the fact is that when police found Zoe on the ground and dead and everything, that piece of jewelry was missing. So who knows? Like, what does this green jewelry mean? Like, why was this green jewelry that important? Meanwhile, Charles and Oliver are 50-50 about this check. Charles, he wants to destroy this check as he feels like they're doing a podcast for nonprofit. Oliver, on the other hand, thinks that $50,000 could be something that could help out this podcast. And just as it seems as if like they're about to rip up the check, a huge, shocking revelation is exposed. And that is that Teddy is Angel, the black market jeweler that Tim was trying to bring down. And it just opens up a whole new door of just many things. Sylvia and Mabel talk about the podcast, Charles and Oliver, and Mabel basically explains as in why she has to finish this case and why she wants to solve this case with Charles and Oliver, as she considers them her friends after a very long time in together. Detective Williams listens to the podcast on her own and decides to help out Mabel in a very big way by giving her Tim Kono's cell phone. But she doesn't do it personally. She mails out the package just like that. And so sometime later, Mabel finds the two at Charles's place. She gives them a peace offering and apologizes for not being honest completely with them. And the episode basically ends with just Mabel revealing the cell phone to Charles and Oliver, and Charles revealing to Mabel that Teddy is Angel, and you know what could possibly happen next. And like I said, I felt like this was a cool episode in my opinion. It opened up the doors for new suspects and new characters were introduced as well. Some of the questions that I have about this is that who is Cutter? And why was Tim going to meet up with Cutter? Another question I have is that will Detective Williams actually help out everyone with this podcast and with this case as well? Like, does she have more information that's not revealed yet to the public? Another question I have is that why did Tim buy so much jewelry from Angel? Like, what was the point of that if you was looking for one specific piece of jewelry? And like, it's just a whole crazy ball game. My potential idea when it comes to suspects now is Angel, of course. Like, Tim was trying to bring him down for many different reasons. Like, who knows? Angel, and I've been seeing some folks in a Reddit forum thinking it may be Jan. Jan, she's suspect number 2 in my opinion. Like, those are the two people that I consider as suspects now. Only time will tell with what happens next. We have 4 more episodes before this is over. And so thanks for watching. And until next time, goodbye.